I own 5 investment properties and spent the last 7 years building a property portfolio. But what if it disappeared overnight and had to start again from zero in 2026? Well, I'll show you the 6 steps I'd take to build it all back, including how I'd save a deposit without living on tuna on toast, then how I'd turn one property into 2 without saving another cent, and finally, the free tools that tell you if a property is actually worth buying before you commit. That way, by the end, you'll have the full playbook updated for 2026. And I should be really upfront about my own bias and say that my company, Opes Partners, helps investors buy new build investment properties. So I've got an incentive to tell you that property is the answer for everything. I'm not going to do that because property might not be the right fit for you. And that's not even where I'd start either, because properties are expensive. So before you even think about property, I'd start with my own bank balance. So if you get paid $1,000 a week into your bank and you spend, let's call it $400 a week, and that goes to your rent or to your mortgage, and let's say you spend another $100 on bills, and then you spend another $250 on groceries, and then of course petrol's really expensive these days, so we're spending $100 on petrol. And then we've got $100 on Uber Eats, brunches, and Netflix. Well, that only leaves you with $50 to invest and build wealth for your future. And you're probably just using that to survive until your next payday, where it all starts again. Now, why did that happen? Why is it that so many of us get to the end of payday or of our pay cycle and we've run out of money? It's because you don't have a paycheck routine. So I like to think of your income like a river. Money flows in every fortnight, and right now for most people, the money comes in and flows straight back out again. And the solution isn't to save as much money as you can in your bank account, because you're probably just going to spend it. Instead, you want to control your money and put it into a different place where you're not going to spend it. And most financial creators on YouTube will tell you not to spend all your money, and I agree with that to some extent. But if you've got money in your bank account, I always find that people spend it. So it's much easier to take the amount of money that you want to save each week, fortnight, or month and just put it into a different bank account. Put it somewhere else so that you can spend everything that's left in your bank account guilt-free, because that's what most people do. I'll give you an example. When I started working, like in my first ever full-time job, I earned $42,000 a year, and that's about $660 a week after tax. But I still saved $100 a week religiously. And that's because the money got automatically transferred into a special bank account that I needed this little device to log into. And so it was always too much of a faff, and the savings just started piling up very, very slowly, right? And that's where I often suggest to investors that you start using the Barefoot Investors bucket system. So this is where, as soon as your pay hits your account, 60% stays in your main account. And that is your blow account. It's where you pay for your rent or your mortgage, your power, your food, all of the essentials. 10%, that's going to get automatically transferred into your splurge account. This is for your guilt-free spending, clothes, drinks, takeouts, movies, whatever makes you happy. And seriously, you should spend this, right? Because if your system or your paycheck routine doesn't include fun, you're not going to stick to it. Another 10%, that is going to go into your Smile account. This is where you save up for the bigger stuff. So like new furniture or a weekend away or short-term goals that are going to keep you motivated and moving forward. And that means that you've got 20% ready to go into the most important account, which is your fire extinguisher account. This is the one that changes your life. These are your savings that you're going to use either to pay off debt or to invest and get ahead. And I actually do this, right? I once applied for a mortgage, and the bank started asking me, what's a Smile account? What's a splurge account? What's this blow account? And what are you spending that on? And what's your fire extinguisher account? Like, they're like, this makes no sense. And that's because they clearly hadn't read the Barefoot Investor. But you need to get started with a paycheck routine. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very hard to get ahead, and you're never going to control your money. And if you're finding this useful, do me a quick favor and hit the like button, because that's how I know which videos I should do more of or less of. And honestly, it really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Subscribing, that helps too. You guys have helped us build the largest property investing community in the country, and we're on our way to growing this channel to 50,000 subscribers. And if you do already subscribe, you probably already know that I didn't buy 5 investment properties earning 42 grand a year the whole time. The truth is that the median salary in New Zealand is about 70 grand a year. And it's really hard to get ahead just earning the average wage. So when I moved from 42 grand to earning 44 grand a year, that made investing easier. Then I got a pay raise going to 60 grand a year, and then eventually 70, and then 80 grand and so on. And every time my income went up slowly over many years, it's just easier to get ahead when you've got more money hitting your bank account. You still should set up your buckets first and control where your money goes, because otherwise you might earn more and then it just turns out you spend more too. But I think a lot of people ignore the obvious, that there are only 5 main ways to make more money in your job. You can ask for a pay rise, so do the same job for the same company, but just get paid more money for it. You can get promoted internally, so bigger job, same company, but more money. You could do the same job for a different employer, right? Do a bit of a lateral move to get higher pay. You could do a different job at a different employer, but get a promotion by switching companies. That way you can earn more money. Or you can retrain for a different career, get some new skills in a new industry and potentially get a new pay scale as well. Or of course you could stop being an employee together and start your own thing, but that's a different video. And other than completely retraining, I've done all of these things, switched jobs, switched careers, jumped around to try and increase that pay over time. And that's honestly what it often takes if you're wanting to take that proactive approach to get ahead. I mean, I got my biggest pay jump by switching companies. It was a major step up in responsibility, but I got paid 25% more overnight. Now, no one is just going to come and offer you these sorts of opportunities, right? You've got to make them happen for yourself. But I call this the earn, baby, earn strategy. And I'm not just saying, go ask your boss for a pay rise. I mean, you've got to work smart to deliver for your boss and help the company make even more money, because that's how they can justify paying you more. But do all of that. Keep learning like you are now, because then if you do that, earning more is inevitable. Now, once you've got that surplus, let's say $200 a week, the question is, where do you put it? Well, in my book, Wealth Plan, we break it down into 3 stages. The starting blocks, running the race, and crossing the finish line. If I'm at the starting block, so no property yet, my goal is to save a deposit for my first home, and I would do 3 main things. First, I would max out my employer's contribution to KiwiSaver, because it basically feels like free money. So if you put 3% into your KiwiSaver, your employer typically matches that. It's actually going up to 4% over the next few years, and the government even chips in a bit too. And when you buy your first home, you can withdraw almost all your entire balance and use that as your property deposit. The second thing I'd do is look at ways to buy a house with a lower deposit. So usually you need a 20% deposit to buy a house to live in. But around half of first home buyers actually don't have a 20% deposit. They might have a 15, 10%, or even a 5% deposit. That could be either through using like the Kāinga or a first home loan, or using a non-bank lender like Squirrel's Launchpad. Now, these are not right for everyone, but if I'm starting out and I'm trying to get ahead, I'd look at these to understand if I can use them to get into my first home faster with using that 5 or 10% deposit. And to be honest, I wouldn't worry too much about finding the perfect home, right? I would focus on finding something that I can live with, potentially turn into a rental property at some point in the future, and just focus on getting an asset. Because if you buy a house for 500K, and let's say you do it with a 25K deposit, right? Just 5% of the money. If the house then goes up by 5% to 525K in value, you just doubled your money, because you've now got 50 grand in equity in the property, because you get a return not just on your own money when you buy a house, you also get a return on the bank's money. Now, between that and smashing down the mortgage, that can help you get into a position where you can invest. But once you're in a house, it is time to turn that one house into 2, and then potentially to 3, and then maybe eventually to 5. But to do that, you need equity, right? Enough that you can use the equity, the wealth that you've got in your home as a deposit for your next property without saving another cent. Now, here's how it works. Once your house is valuable enough or your mortgage is low enough, you can borrow against the wealth you already have in your home, and the banks call this usable equity. Now, there are 2 ways to build this usable equity faster. Option 1 is to smash down your mortgage. That could be getting in flatmates, charging them $200 to $250 a week, take that money and make extra payments on your mortgage. So if you've got two flatmates at $200 a week, that's potentially an extra $20,000 a year off your mortgage after you cover their share of power and internet and those kinds of things. Option 2 is to renovate that property and get it revalued. So if you can refresh the carpets or paint the walls or tidy up or tart up the property, and then you get a valuer in, if they say that your renovations have made your home worth more, if it's more valuable, you can borrow against that higher valuation to buy your investment property as long as you meet the bank's other criteria. And in my cheat sheet that I've written specifically for this video, I go through the specific renovations that add the most value to your properties, or at least tend to. If you click the link in the description, you can download our cheat sheet for free. Now, before you even start looking at properties, you need to build a team around you. And that's because here's what happens otherwise. You find a property you love, you get excited about buying that either as your own home or as an investment, and then you scramble to find a mortgage advisor or you rush to get finance approved, and it can mean that you start to make decisions under pressure. And that's how people buy the wrong property. So who do you need in your team? First of all, a mortgage advisor. They can help you figure out which bank is most likely to give you a home loan, because each bank has hundreds of pages of lending criteria, and you need someone who knows how to get a mortgage approved. And for each of these people you need in your team, you can get a list of who I tend to recommend in that cheat sheet when you download it below. The second person is a financial advisor. This is the person who helps you figure out what to buy, where, and when. They look at your income, your goals, your risk tolerance, and build a plan around that. Investors who work with a financial advisor, they tend to end up with almost 4 times as much money, according to one study, compared to people who don't use a financial advisor at all. The third person you need, if you're going to invest in property, is a property manager. Because unless you want to deal with blocked toilets at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, you really need a property manager. They'll help find the right tenant, collect rent, handle maintenance, and take care of all the compliance so you don't have to. And then fourthly, again, if you're investing, you need an accountant, because once you own a property, you need someone who understands property tax or investment property tax. And that's exactly why I built the Opes Wealth Pathway, because most people don't know where to find all of these people or how it works together. So if you bring your numbers, our advisors will map out what's realistic and what your first investment move might be. Click the link in the description, choose your advisor and find a time that suits you. It's absolutely free for that first session. Once you get enough wealth to invest in property, that's where you move to running the race. This is where you can borrow the deposit for your first investment property off that main home. The way this works is, let's say your home is worth $800,000 and you own $500,000 against it. That's your mortgage. You can borrow up to 80% of your property's value, $640K, and so there is a $140,000 difference between the maximum you can borrow against your property and your current mortgage, your current home loan. And that means you've got $140,000 in usable equity. Now, you could use that for anything, right? You could spend it going on holiday or buying a boat or using it as a deposit on a $700,000 new build. That's the no cash needed method, and it's how many early stage investors build their property portfolios. So how do you decide which property to buy? Well, for years, there was no simple way to answer that. Most people just look at the gross yield, which is the annual rent divided by the value of your property. But I don't really like the gross yield that much because it ignores every cost. It ignores how much of your own money goes into the property, which is why I built my own property rating system. And here's where it works. You plug in a property, any property, and it shows you the projected cash flow and how much your property could be worth in the future. But it also rates your property as a high opportunity, standard opportunity, or one that requires review. And this is based on how much the property might go up in value in the future, the cash flow, and what it costs you to actually buy that property. That way you can see which properties could give you a higher return in the future. And here's the brutal truth. Most investors will never run this comparison. They'll buy the property that feels right, the one with the nice kitchen. And that's how you end up with one that requires review when a high opportunity was sitting right next to it. You see, the difference between the right property and the wrong one could be hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. And now there's a free tool that tells you which is which before you commit. The link is down in the sheet. I remember when I bought my first investment property. I was terrified. What if the tenant didn't pay? What if something broke? But I'd done the numbers. I had my team, and that first rent payment hitting my account, that's when it felt real. So if I lost everything and had to start again in 2026, I'd get my pay sorted. I'd set up my 4-bucket pay routine. I'd build a deposit. I'd build a team, and I'd run every property through Opes Plus before I committed. Now, what's the first step you're going to take? Comment the word buckets if you're setting up your paycheck routine. Comment equity if you're ready to use your home to buy your next investment property. Now, someone recently left a comment on one of my videos saying that my strategy is the worst way to invest in property, and honestly, they made some solid arguments. So I made a whole video breaking down their case and looking at what the data actually says. Tap the video on your screen and I'll see you in there.